talk about important things. It's a place where we bring a little slice of the news to you. It's a place where we do important things, have important conversations. It's also things that I like to talk about. My name is Cameron Cowan, and this is the Cameron Journal Podcast. Hello, everyone. My name is Cameron Cowan. This is the Cameron Journal Podcast. You'll notice that I actually shaved this week so I don't look super homeless, and we did the hair and everything and all this sort of thing. So that was super nice. I'm experimenting with new ways of doing the intro, trying to include some of the audio bits that I use in the audio only version on all the podcast services here on the live stream. Still learning software, still figuring out all that sort of thing, nailing all that stuff down. So that's super exciting. Still working on camera angles and all that sort of thing, but we have a good show tonight. All very, very exciting. What do we have this week? We have the Justice Department thinking about doing stuff with Steve Bannon now that he's been held in contempt of Congress. There's new stuff in the Matt Gaetz sex trafficking case because his compadre completely rolled over on him. No surprise there. And we're also looking at the China-Taiwan situation, which I recently wrote about on my Substack, and we're also talking about the budget negotiations going on with Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia. So, and also Biden's town hall last night was interesting. He did that on CNN. So we're going to go through all of that. It's been an interesting week in the news. I wouldn't say a busy week in the news, but an interesting week in the news. I am recovering this week a little bit from doing my grad school packet. Was last week. I've been teaching a writing class called The Power of Story, which I've been doing writing. We're going to be talking about self-publishing, all this sort of thing. And I've been doing that. I've been teaching that class 2 nights a week now. So we're halfway through with the class now. So that'll be over in November, which is really exciting. And I've been recording that. So that's been a lot of fun. And because of that, the weekly news podcast is going to be on Fridays, not Thursdays, until November. I'm also planning a little get out of town road trip in the middle of November. I'm going down to California to see my buddy, and I'm also going to cruise through some prospective places I might want to move to in the future. So I wanted to go check a couple things out and see how all that's going to go. So we're super excited for that. It is a bit chilly here in the Pacific Northwest. In so much as I feel chilly here in my studio, and it was a bit chilly outside. It was 59 degrees in the car. I had a bunch of errands to run today. Was dashing all over the city, grabbing this, that, and the other thing. So, that was fun, and we're having a deep low front right now moving through the region, which is giving us lots of clouds and rain. And from near as I can tell with the traffic on I-5, the poor people here in Seattle could not handle that much water falling from the sky. Even though it happens at the rate of 39 inches per annum, people were still not okay with with all of that. So You'll notice we were a bit light on blog content this week, and I apologize for that. I was very exhausted after doing Packet last week and also getting prepared for my class, which is also part of my grad school program. So we were a little bit light on content for the blog this week, but that's okay. There are over 500 pieces of content on the blog to read. So if you're looking for something to read, I know you can find something because the library rolls deep. So, in fact, here in the near future, I'm going to be doing a best of compilation um, in a magazine style format, a best of compilation with all sorts of interesting bits and bobs of things that I've written as the years have gone by, including some classics like I'll Just Remote In, Nana and the Computer, and I'll Just Remote In 2, Nana Gets an iPhone. There also was some of the more popular ones I've done, like Jax Teller as a symbol of the proletariat, and the articles I've written about having gynecomastia and being overweight. So they'll be coming out in due course. I started organizing that effort this week. I'd pulled all the content off the blog, so I'm going through it currently and kind of deciding what stays and what goes and all this sort of thing. So it's yeah, so it's a lot of fun. We're getting through all of that, so that's good. I found some other travel stories that I had written before I started working on a book of travel stories. So some of those got pulled out to go in the book rather than go in the magazine, including a rant I did about Amtrak and trains in America, which goes with some really interesting stories I have about train travel in the United States. So, yeah, so that's a lot of fun. Like I said, a lot of stuff happening and coming down the pike. I am still working on the produced episodes for the podcast for season 2 of the Cameron Journal podcast. I am currently still, unfortunately, writing some of the episodes. Most of them are done, but I was working on them a little bit earlier, and I was so but it's coming along. So we'll get those wrapped up in the next couple weeks and get those out hopefully in time for the holidays. But we'll see. I was trying to get those out in September. You'll notice it's late October. It's mid October, almost late October, and they are still not done. So grad school has been going a little bit crazy. So getting a Master's of Fine Arts is no joke. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of admin. A lot is going on. But the nice thing about my doing the teaching practicum at this stage is that next semester I won't have any huge, big, gnarly projects to work on. I'll just be able to put together my teaching packet, and I will be able to call it good. So, very happy and excited about all of that, and very enthusiastic about being able to have some more time next semester to focus on getting some books out and all this type of thing. A lot of interesting things coming down the pike. My cereal, the department store, getting that ready to go. Also working on some other sort of half-done books where I have a lot of research and things gathered, and I just need to kind of finish writing all the bits and start getting them edited and all this time together. So my goal is that we're going to have a really great 2022. So recovering from the pandemic and traveling for 6 months and getting back to Seattle and getting into a graduate program and all this type of thing it's just been a lot. It's been a lot. So I know I have not necessarily been as snappity snap on top of it as I usually am or what you guys have come to expect to me. But if you guys will continue to bear with me, I have a lot of great stuff for you guys. So I would just encourage you to please bear with. Please bear with. We're going to get there. I promise. We are going to get there. It's going to be a thing. We're going to make it. I promise. So I am I am busy. Thank you. I saw a comment from someone who's watching on Facebook. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Um, I I was watching this week on HBO Max. There's a really great documentary called 4 Hours on January 6th, and I was watching it. It's a deep dive with a lot of original footage about the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol by various and sundry Trump supporters, and was um, I was shocked again at how intentional people were in trying to stop the democratic process of government at that time. Pardon me. Oxygen is what I need, and a nap, apparently. I was surprised at how intentional um, they were with the insurrection. I was also surprised at how um, much they did not necessarily want to acknowledge what exactly they were doing, but I was also amazed at how violent it was. Especially, they had footage from when they were trying to, the crowd was trying to break past the police into one of the tunnel entrances into the Capitol, and 50 officers held back a throng of 15,000 people who were trying to burst into the Capitol. And that was intense and amazing, but it was also um, really troubling that it was, 50 people who were able to kind of, secure at least that part of the building. People did get in through side entrances. Obviously, there were people in the Capitol running around the chambers, all this type of thing. There was kind of one poor officer on his own in the Senate chamber trying to convince people to leave and all this type of thing. Um, and it was the footage from the rioters themselves really proves the fact that um, it was not just a bunch of tourists and things went crazy. There was definitely intention, especially with the speech that Trump gave before. And even some of the rioters said that, like, oh yeah, like things were already getting crazy and they were already pushing down barriers and all this type of thing. And they were like, oh, it's gonna get more crazy when the Trump speech is over and everybody else shows up and all this type of thing. Like there was a concerted effort to go to the Capitol and try to stop the certification of the electoral ballots. And I was also amazed at how conscious representatives were that if they left the building or completely evacuated, how that could be the end of American democracy. And if you listen to the rant that I posted on the podcast from that week, so that would be January, I think it's 9th or 10th of this year. And I did a 45-minute rant where I said we almost lost democracy this week, and I don't feel like anyone's taking it seriously. I was impressed at what a good job that documentary did of using the rioters' own footage to prove exactly my point. And that was it was a lot. It was a significant sort of moment, and it was something that I don't think enough people have really taken seriously. And I don't think people realize that with the whole narrative we have going, that there was, the election was fraudulent and that it was stolen and there were all these issues and all this type of thing, that our form of government and our freedoms are directly under attack by the people who are claiming that they want to be free. And they are willing to burn the entire system of government down in order to stop what they view as an unjust evil party who is, sacrificing children, raping children, killing, all this type of thing. One of the rioters is like, well, yeah, most of the people who got involved in the Trump movement were just angry that, there were 800,000 kids being killed every year and Donald Trump was going to stop that. Now, I'm not quite sure what the connection between human trafficking, a real problem that is worthy of address, what the connection to Donald Trump is going to solve that. I'm not quite sure what that bridge is. That's never been really made clear. But in all my investigations of QAnon and all this type of thing, conveniently, the crimes follow very neatly in party lines. Which, if you know anything about crime or have ever watched a true crime podcast or dealt with human trafficking or anything like that, human trafficking and child abuse does not know party lines. It does not know political affiliation. It's very good at crossing both sides of the aisle. And one of the things that I think is funny, entertaining, is that the QAnon conspiracy goes along with this whole idea that the Republicans are the good ones who are not doing these things and the Democrats are the ones who are evil. And this is a great transition because we're going to talk about Matt Gaetz and his actual sex trafficking crimes. Again, you'll notice does not follow party lines. Yes, so the Justice Department is having a busy week this week. Says here from the week. Justice Department reportedly added 2 top prosecutors to the Matt Gaetz sex trafficking case, says here. After weeks of brutal headlines in the spring about a Justice Department sex trafficking investigation, Representative Matt Gaetz, Republican Florida, has been keeping a pretty low profile recently, with fewer campaign events and 0 appearances on Fox News, and his fundraising has withered with the faded spotlight. The Daily Beast reported Thursday in the most recent quarter from July through September, Gaetz reported raising just under $500,000 and spending $613. In the previous 2 quarters, Gaetz raised $1.8 million and $1.3 million respectively. But while news coverage of the investigation has waned, the investigation has apparently been humming along. Gaetz' former wingman, Joel Greenberg, got a judge on Monday to delay his sentencing on sex trafficking and other charges to March from November because prosecutors said he is continuing to provide valuable assistance in their broader investigation. Greenberg pleaded guilty in May to sex trafficking the same 17-year-old girl he says he saw Gaetz have sex with, among other charges. The Justice Department has also added 2 top prosecutors to the Gaetz investigation, the New York Times and ABC News reported Thursday, each citing 2 sources familiar with the matter. The prosecutors, one a public corruption investigator with an expertise in child exploitation crimes, and the other a top leader of the public corruption unit, have been working on the Florida-based investigation for at least 3 months, the Times reports. A Gaetz spokesman told ABC News that Gaetz is innocent and, quote, no number of political operative prosecutors at a politically weaponized DOJ will change this. The investigation started last August at the tail end of the Trump administration. So that, as I said, the fact that all these QAnon rioters think that Trump was going to stop human trafficking and it was all the Democrats' fault should maybe look within themselves. You know, people who live in glass houses and all that should not throw stones. The Justice Department also has been busy this week when former Trump advisor Steve Bannon was held in contempt of Congress, and that will now head to the Justice Department for possible criminal prosecution, although no one knows if he will ultimately be charged. Most people think it's pretty unlikely. It says here, according to former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti, they have to weigh, first of all, whether or not there's a federal interest in proceeding with this prosecution. They also have to think about whether or not they have the evidence to convict beyond a reasonable doubt, and that's going to be very complicated in a case like this because there are circumstances that can make it difficult. So, yeah, it's, Steve Bannon is obviously already not cooperating with Congress about matters relating to the Trump insurrection, which is why he was held in contempt of Congress to start with. And according to this prosecutor, he says if Mr. Bannon decided to plead the fifth, that would be a very good reason not to comply with the subpoena. He of course, hasn't done so yet, but there are risks for the Justice Department. So he has refused to turn over any evidence or testify about his communications leading up to the insurrection, but it seems like the Justice Department may not have a good case to prosecute him, which means he may be able to sort of get away with not turning over evidence or having conversations with prosecutors. Alternatively, if the federal government does move forward and they do indict him and all that type of thing, they will be able to take the evidence they're looking for by force, which could reveal all sorts of interesting things. There's also this isn't the only kind of legal liability Trump is facing. There are other legal liabilities hanging out in the world for Mr. Trump. So this is just one of the many things that he's dealing with right now. But Steve Bannon, I think, in for his own protection and his own involvement, is likely going to, avoid turning over anything for as long as possible. And honestly, given Steve Bannon's propensity for keeping things secret and all this type of thing, he may very well simply be getting rid of as much evidence as humanly possible, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's exactly what he was doing. So, um, moving on to kind of shifting subjects to a completely different direction. Um, I had written about U.S. China conflicts on my Substack, CameronJournal.substack.com. It's free to the end of the year. It's This story kind of caught my attention. On Thursday, yesterday, President Joe Biden didn't hesitate when asked whether the U.S. would come to Taiwan's defense if China attacked. Yes, we have a commitment to do that, Biden said during a CNN town hall in Baltimore. But the White House later clarified the president's comments, telling Politico there had been no change in policy. Quote, the U.S. defense relationship with Taiwan is guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, a White House spokesperson said. We will uphold our commitment under the act, we will continue to support Taiwan's self-defense, and we will continue to oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo. Biden made a similar comment in August during an interview with ABC News after the president suggested that the U.S. would defend the island if there were an attack, a deviation from the United States' long-held position. The White House said the president misspoke. While Washington is required by the Taiwan Relations Act to provide the country with defense resources, it has followed a policy of strategic ambiguity when it comes to military intervention to protect Taiwan if China attacks. The White House in recent weeks has projected the message that the U.S. commitment to Taiwan is rock solid as tensions rise between the country and China. Earlier this month, China sent dozens of warplanes over Taiwan's air defense zone. Taiwan has condemned the incursions as part of Beijing's increasing military harassment. China has defended the actions as just and necessary for maintaining stability in the region. Beijing still sees Taiwan as part of its own territory, although the country split in 1949. There's a long, interesting history regarding the Chinese Civil War during and after World War II, into why the Chinese-Taiwan situation is the way it is. And as I said, I would encourage you to dash over to my Substack, CameronJournal.substack.com, and read the U.S. versus China situation. I kind of do a brief history of the Chinese Civil War and how all that happened. I'm not going to do it here now because we try to keep the weekly news show focused on the news and not a bunch of boring, tedious history. But if you want to know more about that conflict, why it's important, how the U.S. got involved, definitely head over to my Substack and give that a read. And feel free to subscribe. I post every Monday and Friday, and the Substack is free till the end of the year. And then in January, it'll be $5 a month. So over on the Substack, I focus on business and political trends. And obviously, if there's a conflict between the U.S. and China over Taiwan, the implications to global markets, global trading, and global shipping would be dire. So, kind of from a business perspective, that conflict is difficult, and it has, kind of these broad implications. It's really one of the 5 potential flashpoints. When I was in grad school, we were always talking and thinking about what, if the next great power war was going to start, where would it start? And U.S. China over Taiwan was always in the top 5, right behind India, Pakistan, and other conflicts throughout the world. So that it's something not. I don't think it's going to happen anytime in the foreseeable future. But as if China keeps posturing and makes any attempts to annex Taiwan, whatever have you, that could quickly escalate into a shooting war. So that's an important thing to remember and be mindful of. Also, kind of shifting to domestic news, continuing that shift. Biden had a town hall last night, and he used it as a way to discuss and sell his social spending package, which is the annual budget for fiscal year 2022. He wants to spend $350 billion more a year for the next decade, adding up to $3.5 trillion. to expand Medicare, do free community college, have paid time off, make the child tax credits permanent, institute universal pre-K, all this type of thing. It says here that Biden spent the first portion of the evening in Baltimore not only confirming the various concessions he's likely to make in order to pass his Build Back Better agenda, he also discussed in notable specifics the areas where he is finding disagreement with Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. It was a change in approach right as negotiations on the reconciliation package entered their 11th hour. This is from Politico here. It says the president has been working furiously behind the scenes to bring together a divided Democratic Party, meeting repeatedly with lawmakers from all corners of the left. On Thursday, he went public, placing a spotlight on the two main holdouts, even as he downplayed disagreements and even praised their negotiating skills. Joe's not a bad guy. He's a friend, he said of Manchin, while talking about the difficulty in coming to an agreement with him, expanding Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing benefits. I think it's a good idea, but here's the thing. Mr. Manchin is opposed to that. And I think Senator Sinema is as well, Biden said, adding that the hearing benefits were important to the senator. The president said he believed he'd be able to address these issues without changing Medicare. Biden also called Sinema smart as the devil and very supportive of the environmental agenda, but he hastened to add she will not raise a single penny on taxes for the corporate side or on wealthy people. After the fact, a White House aide clarified the president was referring to the challenge of having the votes to move forward on raising the corporate rate, not the ability to raise revenue through a range of other tax fairness proposals, which Senator Sinema supports. The remarks nevertheless effectively place the two senators at center stage, and they suggest that the White House is still having difficulty coming to final agreements on key items and might be eager to see Democratic voters intensify their pressure campaigns on them to get on board. I really wish President Obama had done that for 8 years when he was in office. Things would have happened very differently if President Obama had done the same thing and put pressure on Republicans to actually, get stuff done, as they managed to not do from 2011 to 2017. Effectively, turning the Obama presidency into a do-nothing presidency. And although a lot of people remember it as Republicans being intractable, the reality is Obama never went on the offense. So it's good to see Biden out and about, going on the offense, getting people to put on the pressure campaign with to Manchin and Sinema to get them on board, to get this moving through. There's also some talk of possibly modifying the filibuster, and Biden mentioned that at the town hall as well. It's reported that they want to try to get the vote for the Build Back Better agenda and the infrastructure bill going next week before Biden's big trip to the climate summit in Europe. But this next story kind of shows that may not happen. It says here the Democratic West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, this is from Daily Caller, is reportedly willing to scrap the reconciliation bill entirely rather than accept a number that he believes is too high. According to a report from Axios, Manchin told independent Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, who would have preferred a $6 trillion social spending bill but negotiated it down to $3.5 trillion, that he was comfortable with not passing the reconciliation bill at all. Joe Manchin today, from Josh Kroshar on Twitter, said, quote, "This will contribute to inflation. We've already passed the American Rescue Plan. We should just pass the infrastructure bill and, pause for 6 months." Democratic Montana Senator Jon Tester recounted the conversation, which occurred during a Wednesday lunch. Joe said, "I'm comfortable with nothing," Bernie said. "We need to do $3.5 trillion. The truth is both of them are in different spots," Tester said. Tester went on to say that he believed Manchin would rather do nothing than agree to a higher number than the $1.5 trillion he floated as acceptable. He added that Manchin had punctuated his stance by forming a zero with his thumb and forefinger, saying, "I'm comfortable with zero." Democratic Delaware Senator Chris Coons described the situation in much the same way, also knowing that Manchin had held up his hand to form a zero. He said that Manchin preferred not to do it at all. So, someone, Bill Shire on Twitter, mentioned that most progressives believe Manchin wants to kill Build Back Better, so when he says, "How about zero?" it's a credible threat, which makes it easier to progressives to accept a number close to Manchin's proposed $1.5 trillion. Does Manchin really want zero or $1.5 trillion? We'll never know. So, that's I think the idea that Biden's gonna get a vote next week is dicey. I don't see how that's going to happen, given Manchin's idea that we shouldn't have any, or that we should have much less, whatever it is. But if Manchin's willing to torpedo the whole thing and he just wants to pass infrastructure and put everything else on pause for 6 months, I think the chances of the White House getting a vote before Biden has to go to Europe for a climate summit is remote at best. So I'm not quite sure what the White House is thinking on all that is, but perhaps it is something that they know that we don't know, which is always possible. There's all sorts of conversations happening in the back. Perhaps they've peeled off a Republican or two to vote to move things forward. But this is the difficulty when you have razor thin margins in both houses. If anybody from your caucus breaks away, all of a sudden you have a lot of problems. And so it's a very difficult sort of thing. That's the news stories I have for this week. As I said, we didn't have a lot. The news of the week was not incredibly busy. We were still tasseling about all of about the budget and all this sort of thing. And like I said, the Justice Department is very busy with the Steve Bannon prosecution and also the continuing Matt Gaetz thing. Donald Trump is starting his own social network called Truth. It's probably going to be a quote-unquote censorship-free zone, and be able to, be as racist and bigoted as you want on social media without having to be accountable to, Twitter or Facebook or anything like that. It will be interesting to see if they actually make something that works that people can sign up for. Without his Twitter account, Trump is still issuing letters from his offices in Florida, most of whom do end up getting posted to Twitter by people, reporters, other people, all this sort of thing. There's a lot of hubbub. Last night it came out that Alec Baldwin accidentally shot somebody using a prop gun on the set of a Western movie that he was working on. He killed the cinematographer and injured the director. So there's been a lot of kind of hubbub in film Twitter about how one handles guns on set. I'm still trying to figure out if the gun was filled with blanks, how he killed somebody. That seems suspicious. I'm trying to put that whole situation together. I'm not quite sure how that all works, but somehow, some way, that's a thing that's happening in the world. So that's been kind of a preoccupation as of late. And the other kind of big story, I didn't really bring up a news story for this, but the other kind of big thing that's happening is the situation with Facebook antitrust, and also Facebook wanting to rebrand itself. So Zuckerberg announced that he wanted to rebrand Facebook away from social media and focus on quote unquote the metaverse, which is his new augmented / virtual reality project. Facebook already owns Oculus, which is a VR system, and they want to move towards doing more in the augmented reality, virtual reality space. And he wants to create this thing called the metaverse. He's already even working on a work application to create like virtual conference rooms where you can like be virtual, but like have it be in sort of like a digital format, so like you're not just like on a Zoom camera with like you in your house. You're in like a conference room. There's like a digital avatar of you sitting and like all this sort of thing to kind of lend a air of reality to the virtual experience. And so there's been a couple of articles running around about, will a rebrand save Facebook? No, because Facebook still has major systemic structural issues in terms of spreading information, and the fact that their platform is a net negative for democracy and governments and freedom around the world. That's still a problem. So no matter how they redress it up or what they change their focus to or whatever have you, him trying to rebrand it and change his focus really just kind of lends to the fact that he doesn't care about what Facebook's effect is on greater society. It doesn't matter to him that his platform has had adverse effects on civil society and has, caused revolutions around the world, has done nothing for American democracy, and has generally, to some greater or lesser degree, when it comes to information, been more trouble than it's worth. So the fact that he's just kind of like, well, I'm going to go hide in my virtual reality, does not give me confidence that Facebook is ever going to fix its structural problems unless and until they actually um, decide to address them. Hey, Teresa, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Um, and so with Facebook's big rebrand, the answer to the question if Facebook is going to rebrand and thereby save itself, the answer is likely no, because there's still major structural problems with social media. And that even includes the study coming out that's saying that Instagram has been a net negative for young people, especially teenagers, and it's causing a raft of mental health issues and all this sort of thing. The reality is, we've had social media now for 10 years, and the sad the sad part of it is that we're now learning the long-term effects of social media in society, what it's done, how it's affected us, what it's doing to society, what it's doing to mental health. And the reality is not great. I mean, that's the sad part is the situation is not great, and social media is having an adverse effect. It's had some benefits. It's allowed me to have a career bringing my content to you, um, in a way that might not have been possible before. But conversely, Google and Facebook have sucked up all the advertising dollars and left, you know, advertisers like, newspapers, daily newspapers, all this type of thing, with no real source of sustainable revenue. To allow them to continue operations. So, in another day and time, I might have been writing for, other publications, or doing audio on the radio or something like that. And thanks to Google and Facebook, those are no longer the career paths that they once were. And so now we're out here doing it independently, which, gives me more freedom to do what I want. But conversely, because of the way the ad world works, doesn't necessarily make it as financially sustainable as having a career in broadcasting or media would have a generation ago. So one of the things I get frustrated with the tech world is their complete disregard for um for the problems they have on society, or not understanding how they affect society, or not being willing to adjust their business model or how they do things to mitigate harms on society. And Zuckerberg trying to do this rebrand and move towards the metaverse and away from uh, social media only shows that he doesn't take this seriously. He doesn't care about what Facebook has done to society. He doesn't care about how it's affected elections. He just doesn't care. And that is an attitude I've found throughout tech. And if you want to hear more about that, I highly recommend you listen to Pivot with Kara Swisher and Scott Galloway. They talk about this all the time, smarter and more intelligently than I do. And the callous disregard that they have for effects on society is always deeply concerning. If you want to hear me talk about this, I recently interviewed a guy named Kent Kemish, who is in the biotech space, and he and I have a good 20-minute conversation about tech bros in society. And I talk about these topics, and I say, you guys in tech do stuff, you bypass democracy, and you don't give us as a society a chance to decide if what you're doing is good or if we're interested. And his retort was, well, who would vote against a cure for cancer? So that's how we titled the episode. So look for that in the feed. If you want to, kind of hear how these conversations go in real time and what it looks like when we're having these discussions about what tech is doing and how they try to kind of get in, do things fast, and break things before anybody has a chance to regulate them, so their existence becomes de facto. And how, we're kind of at the behest of a handful of people, usually straight white men, in Silicon Valley who decide massive things about our lives. No time in human history has so few people had such control over the vast majority of humanity. And that's something that I think is worthy of thinking about and talking about and having conversations about, and not just dismissing as the nature of progress or the nature of how things go, or, well, it's new technology, therefore we have to embrace it. It's time to start having conversations about this. It's time to start having conversations about this. And I'm glad that we're finally maybe being able to have those types of conversations. So it's 20 to the hour, which means it's time to end. I always try to keep the news show kind of short. So it's not overwhelming. So we covered some interesting news stories this week, had some personal anecdotes, talked about the insurrection documentary. If you have HBO Max, I highly recommend going and watching 4 Hours on January 6th. It's a great documentary. Getting an HBO Max subscription is kind of cool because you sometimes get pre-release movies. Like right now, Dune is available for the weekend. So if you want to watch Dune, but also want to find out about the insurrection, go join HBO Max. I've been enjoying my HBO Max subscription, so I can definitely recommend. Anyway, enough about that. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I will see you next Friday for the weekly news podcast. This has been the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. I'll see you soon. Bye bye.